She was a nurse, a mother, and a wife, and one of the most notorious women in South Africa. Today we are talking about Daisy Louise de Melker. By the end of her trial, she was accused of poisoning two of her husbands, as well as her only son. Newspapers at the time would refer to her as the Black Widow, and we know on the 30th of December 1932, she was hanged in South African prison. But was she truly a cold-blooded killer, or was she the victim of bad luck and circumstance? Let's dive into this chilling case of Daisy de Melker. So Daisy was born Daisy Hankhorn Smith on the 1st of June 1886 in Seven Fountains, which was then the Cape Colony, which is now the Western Cape. She was one of 11 children. We know at that time they didn't have access to birth control. And as a teenager, she lived between Zimbabwe and Cape Town, eventually training as a nurse at the Berea Nursing Home in Durban. And her early life was marked by a number of tragedies and hardships. So in the first one, she fell in love with a civil servant by the name of Bert Fuller, and the two planned to marry in 1907. She would have been about 21 years old at the time. But on the very day of her wedding, Bert died of black water fever. Apparently, he was in her arms when he passed. And this would not be the last time that Daisy stood beside a dying husband. We know that Bert left her a little small inheritance. Maybe this proved useful for her endeavors in the future. We do not know. But in 1909, Daisy married William Alfred Cowell, a plumber in Johannesburg, and they had 5 children together. But we know that due to sanitation and medical practices at the times, that infancy death rates were pretty high, and only one of them survived until adulthood, and that was her son named Rhodes Cecil. Now, on the morning on the 11th of January 1923, William fell violently ill after drinking Epsom salts his wife had prepared. Now, his symptoms were disturbing at the time. He foamed at the mouth. He screamed in agony whenever someone touched him, and he had spasms. He died a horrific death. The doctor suspected strychnine poisoning, but the official cause of death was ruled as a chronic illness. In those days, strychnine was used as a rat poison, and we know that it sort of blocks the glycine receptors in your cells. So glycine is something, it's amino acid, it's something that causes your cells to relax, but strychnine blocks this so that your muscles can't relax, and eventually you die a horrific death because of going into spasms, because of going into pain, and sometimes you even asphyxiate. So this is not a pleasant way to go. And we know that Daisy nearly inherited 1,800 pounds at the time, which is a fortune. That is a fortune back in 1923. But through whispers circulated around the town that perhaps she was responsible for William's death, nothing ever happened to her. Now, 3 years later, Daisy married another plumber. She seems to like plumbers, Robert Sproat. And in 1923, this is a few years after this, Robert suffered attacks of excruciating pain, very similar to the way her first husband, William, went. He recovered once after such an attack, but weeks later, after sharing drinks with Daisy and her son, he collapsed again, and he would die on the 6th of November 1927, and his death was blamed on a cerebral hemorrhage. No autopsy was performed, and Daisy collected 4,000 pounds in insurance and pension from him, more than double what she had received from her first husband. In 1931, Daisy remarried again, and this time to Sidney de Melker, another plumber. Daisy likes the plumbers, right? But tragedy struck again. On the 2nd of March 1932, her only surviving son, 20-year-old Rhodes, fell gravely ill at work after drinking coffee from a thermos prepared by his mother. His co-worker, James Webster, also became sick because he shared some of the coffee, but he managed to survive. Rhodes wasn't so lucky, and he died 3 days later. At first, the death was blamed on malaria, but suspicions mounted when Daisy collected a small £100 life insurance payout. Would a mother poison her only child? Was this greed, or was this something darker? Now, Robert's brother, William Sprout, this is her third husband, he never trusted Daisy. He raised concerns with the police, and on the 15th of April 1932, authorities exhumed the bodies of her two husbands and her son. And the results were shocking. Rhodes' bodies contained large amounts of arsenic, and traces of strychnine were found in the bones of both William Cowell and Robert Sprout, her first two husbands. And even James Webster's hair and fingernails tested positive for arsenic. James Webster was that friend who had shared the thermos of coffee, so the arsenic was even found in his system. Now, we know that a chemist, Abraham Spickling, confirmed that Daisy had bought arsenic under her former name, Mrs. Sprout, claiming it was to poison a sick cat to put it out of its misery. Now, the trial of Daisy de Melker was a sensation. Oftentimes, I say in those days, they didn't have Netflix. So what they did is they went and they watched trials in public. And trust me, that courtroom was packed because it lasted 30 days. It called over 60 witnesses. The Crown brought in Dr. J.M. Watt, a toxicology expert, to explain how the poisons worked. Now, the prosecution argued that Daisy killed for money, first for her husband's life insurance and then her son, perhaps to rid herself of a burden. But her defense claimed that she was innocent, a victim of circumstance, rumors, and unreliable science. But in the end, the judge ruled that there was not enough proof to convict Daisy of murdering her two husbands, but in the case of her son, the evidence was inescapable. We know that he died of arsenic poisoning. The flask contained arsenic because his friend's fingernails also tested positive for that, and she was the one who placed the coffee inside. And on the 30th of December 1932, Daisy de Melker, at just 46 years old, was hanged at the neck until dead at Pretoria Central Prison. She maintained her innocence until the very end. Her assets were saved off to pay her crushing legal debts, and she was buried in a pauper's grave. To this day, Daisy de Melker remains one of the most infamous women in South Africa's history. Was she truly a calculating poisoner who murdered for money, or was she just an unlucky woman caught up in tragedy and targeted by family greed? The truth may never be known, but what do you think? Do you think Daisy was guilty of killing her husband and son, or was she framed? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories.